Chapter 6. The Understanding. Ladies Tremaine and Hackle were enjoying some time to themselves away from the other guests in Lady Hackle's parlor, which was so much grander than her own, with its French doors and its abundance of ferns and exotic flowers. It was almost like a solarium. She thought about how lovely it would be in the future for her and Lady Hackle to be old together, watching their grandchildren run around in this room. Lady Hackle often suggested that Lady Tremaine come live there once their children were married, and if she didn't like the idea of living in the big house with all of them, she could live in the dowager house if she preferred, since there was no dowager in residence. Lady Tremaine loved the idea and always held it in reserve should she never marry again. She had a lovely afternoon with her dear old friend, while the rest of the guests were taking their leisure in their rooms after the picnic. It was the perfect opportunity for the two ladies to sneak off and chat. "Won't the other ladies feel like we've left them out?" asked Lady Tremaine, feeling a bit like a naughty schoolgirl and making Lady Hackle laugh. "Well, we won't tell the other ladies. Most of them are sleeping anyway. The dressing gong won't be for ages, so we have all the time in the world to gossip."
Why don't you come into bed?
I will.
Are you going to take a bath?
I will. Don't get me wrong, I love these gatherings, but sometimes I need a little time to myself. Take it from me, there is nothing like a long afternoon outdoors to make your guests retire to their rooms, she said, laughing again. "I want to hear all about your walk with Sir Richard." Lady Hackle's eyes were all alight, giddy for her friend. "You two seemed so enchanted with each other at the picnic. I didn't dare come over and interrupt, and the next thing I knew, the two of you were gone. I must have all the details." Lady Tremaine remained silent, fidgeting with a spare thread on the hem of her sleeve, trying to avoid Lady Hackle's question. "Will you just look at that?" she said, showing her friend the thread on her sleeve. "I'd better bring it to Rebecca's attention." Lady Hackle gave her friend a knowing look. "Come on, my dear. Something is going on between the two of you. You can't deny it, and I want to know everything. Now spill," she said, laughing and prodding her friend. "I don't deny it, Prudence. I just don't know where to begin." "He's perfect in every single possible way," said Lady Tremaine. Lady Hackle looked very pleased with herself. "What did you talk about? What did he say?" Lady Hackle asked, leaning in as if Lady Tremaine were about to tell her a secret. "We spent much of the time talking about his home, how lovely it was, and how lonely he's been since his wife passed away. He talked of wanting a mother for his daughter, someone to raise her, and to be a wife to him. He spoke of combining our wealth to create a secure future for our children and for ourselves," she said, drifting off to their conversation, remembering how much she wanted him to kiss her, but he was far too much the gentleman to do so. "Didn't he ask you to marry him?" her friend asked, clearly eager to see if she could commend herself on her matchmaking skills. "Not yet. I think he wanted to see if I was disposed to the idea before proposing," said Lady Tremaine, still looking at the bit of thread on her sleeve. She didn't want her friend to know how very much like she liked this gentleman. She didn't really want to admit it to herself. It all seemed so sudden, so out of the blue, and she wondered if she was being foolish. But that's how things were done in these circles. You met someone, married them, and then found out after you were married if you were a good match. If you were, all the better. And if not, then you spent most of your time apart. Most marriages in Lady Tremaine's circle were about combining families, social capital, and resources. Too few were inspired by actual love. She had been fortunate with her first marriage. Not only did her family approve of the match, but they were a good couple. But she had somehow thought the second time she found love, she would do things differently, take her time, and now she found herself dashing into another marriage without knowing much about the gentleman. "What will you say if he asks you tonight?" "You have to say yes," said Lady Hackle, pink-cheeked as if it were herself who was in love. We don't know each other that well, Prudence. Doesn't it all seem too quick? Asked Lady Tremaine. What is there to know? He's a rich man and lives in an enchanted kingdom. He's handsome, dashing, and highly ranked. He's a dream, said Lady Hackle, taking her friend's hand. I'm not sure what I will say, Prudence. We didn't speak of love, though I suppose the implication was there. Lady Tremaine looked up at her friend. She was surprised how much she wanted this man to love her. She feared she was treading into dangerous territory. Tell me everything, from beginning to end. Leave nothing out, not a single word, and then we'll know what you should do, said Lady Hackle. Lady Tremaine took a deep breath. Very well, Prudence, if you insist. You know what a lovely day it was. You picked the perfect place for our picnic. It was such a gorgeous spot. Everything was green, the flowers in bloom, and you know how fond I am of the gazebo across the lake. After the gentlemen returned from their hunt, Sir Richard made his way to me almost immediately and suggested we take a walk. We crossed the little wooden bridge over the lake, and there we talked until you sent Pratt over to let us know everyone was going back to the house. I spoke of my daughters, and he spoke of his. And we talked of what life had been like for both of us after our spouses died. He's such a practical man, very much like the men here in London. Everything was so sensible. We didn't speak of love, though he did speak of how he longed for a woman to run his household, to raise his daughter. He spoke of his loneliness and how much he missed his wife, and how he'd like to have a companionship again. And I understood him, because I want those things too. But I couldn't help but wonder if he wanted love. Of course he does. He spoke of his loneliness and wanting a wife. What else could he have meant? Asked her friend. I feel that is what he meant. At least that is how it felt in the moment. But I might have been swept away by the beauty of it all, said Lady Tremaine. Oh, I've seen the way he looks at you. He has eyes for no one else when you're in the room. I think he is in love with you. Lady Hackle squeezed Lady Tremaine's hand. Lady Tremaine thought Lady Hackle may be right. She felt the same way, and then she realized she knew what she would do. If he asked me, Prudence, I do think I will say yes, she said, taking her hand out of her friend's and putting it to her heart. Can you believe it? Me, marrying again, and moving off to the many kingdoms. As if one king or queen wasn't enough, now I'll be living in a place where the lands are littered with royalty. Lady Tremaine giggled along with her friend. The giddiness was contagious. I imagine your life there with Sir Richard will be quite extravagant, said Lady Hackle. Oh, you will have to invite me to visit. I love you. Oh, you will have to invite me to visit once you are settled. I have to see your new chateau. He hasn't asked me to marry him yet, Prudence. Lady Tremaine looked up at the sound of the dressing gong. Her heart skipped a beat at the thought of seeing Sir Richard again at dinner. Oh my, is it already time to get dressed? Said Lady Hackle. I thought we had ages. We'd better go upstairs and get ready. I want you looking especially beautiful this evening. Lady Tremaine laughed and shook her head at her friend. She had to wonder if they were making too much of all this. By the way, how are you finding Rebecca? Are you happy with her? Asked Lady Hackle, rising from the table to make her way to her room to get ready. Oh, she's delightful. Thank you so much for letting her attend me while I've been here, said Lady Tremaine. Brilliant. Then you shall keep her. She told me of your troubles with poor old Mrs. Bramble, and she did mention how much she'd love to travel with you to the many kingdoms, so I suggested that if you were agreeable, she should stay with you. Lady Hackle smiled knowingly, and Lady Tremaine let out a loud laugh. Oh, you two have been plotting to get me married off, have you? Said Lady Tremaine. Well, my dear, I'd say it was about time, wouldn't you? And why not to a man who looks as if he'd stepped out of the pages of a romance story? I could see you two riding away on a white horse, and I hope you do. I'd love nothing more than to see you happy." Once back in her room, Lady Tremaine gave herself over to Rebecca entirely, letting her dictate her clothing and jewelry and style her hair as she chose. She usually wasn't one for fussing over her appearance, but she wanted to be especially stunning at dinner that evening. "You look beautiful, my lady," Rebecca marveled. "I'm sure Sir Richard will find you captivating." Lady Tremaine narrowed her eyes at the young woman. "Has there been talk downstairs, Rebecca, about Sir Richard and me?" Rebecca blushed. "I admit there has, my lady. One of the upstairs maids says she overheard Sir Richard and his valet discussing plans to return to the many kingdoms tonight once dinner is over, but he wants to speak to you first." Lady Tremaine flushed, even as a sense of dread went through her. Why was he leaving? And why must he speak with her? She had hoped they would have more time together, and she couldn't imagine it was his plan to ask her to marry him if he was leaving this evening. She suddenly felt rather foolish for decking herself out in red velvet and letting Rebecca adorn her hair in sparkling rubies to match. It was the first time she hadn't worn mourning colors since her husband's death. She had even fastened the jade brooch her husband had given her right in the center of her bodice, making it the crowning piece of her gown. Before Rebecca had told her of Sir Richard's plans to leave, Lady Tremaine had felt like a new woman who respected and cherished her past, but chose not to be lost in it, because she was very much looking forward to her future. But now she didn't know what to expect. She had been so excited and so looking forward to this new love affair, and now she felt foolish and adrift once more. "Everything will be just fine, my lady. I'm sure of it," said Rebecca, helping Lady Tremaine with her long white gloves. "In fact, I know it. I often get feelings about how things will turn out, and I think you and Sir Richard are destined for each other." She went to the door. "Are you ready to go down?" she asked, holding it open with a smile. "Yes, Rebecca. I suppose I am as ready as I ever will be." Lady Tremaine felt nervous milling around the drawing room, waiting for everyone to assemble for dinner. Sir Richard hadn't arrived yet, and she was starting to wonder if he had just gone straight back to the many kingdoms, deciding not to speak with her before leaving after all. But then she saw him. He looked as if he had stepped out of the pages of Mrs. Bramble's book of fairy tales. He was far too dashing for his own good, and she felt her face flush again as she wondered what he wanted to discuss. She felt slightly dizzy as he made his way over to her, not even stopping to make polite conversations with those he passed. She was in his direct path. His eyes were fixed on her, and she couldn't help but feel like hunted prey. He had such a serious look on his face, which made her heart flutter, because she was sure he was about to disappoint her. Men often look serious when they were about to disappoint a lady. "My dear Lady Tremaine," he said as he approached, "may I speak with you in the garden before dinner starts?" "I think we have time." She looked at the little gold clock on the mantel. "Lady Hackle said we can take as much time as we need," he replied, and took her by the hand, leading her out the double doors into the garden. They walked over to a pond that was filled with tiny sparkling lights. When she got closer, she saw that they were little mirrored bowls floating on the surface of the water, candles flickering within them, casting remarkable shards of light that danced across Sir Richard's face in the garden. "You wanted to speak with me about something, Sir Richard?" she said, standing very still as she awaited his reply. She felt she had to brace herself for what he was about to say. She feared his words would be a blow, and she wanted to be ready. She tried to make herself solid and unmovable, ready for impact. "I did. I'm afraid I have to leave right after dinner, but I didn't feel it would be right to leave without speaking to you first, not after our talk earlier today. I wanted to make sure there was no misunderstanding. I wouldn't want to leave if there was indeed more we had to say." Lady Tremaine's heart sank. This was what she had feared and expected. Of course their conversation had not been the start of a passionate love affair or a new adventure. It had been nothing more than polite small talk. "You needn't say more, Sir Richard. I understand you completely," she said. She felt foolish for thinking their talk today was anything more than two people who had lost their spouses, connecting over their shared pain. She thought he had spoken of wanting a wife and a mother for his child because he wanted her, but it seemed they were only sharing their stories, not their hearts. She cursed herself for letting herself fall in love with this man so quickly, for imagining a life with him and their children after only a couple of days, after one afternoon of conversation, a conversation she had completely misunderstood. She stood there, so quiet and still, fearing that if she spoke or moved she might break into little pieces and crumble before him. Surely her heart was breaking, but she wondered if it showed on her face. "Do you truly understand, Lady Tremaine? Because I do so want my intentions to be clear." "Oh, your intentions are perfectly clear, Sir Richard," she said, wanting nothing more than to be out of his company. She couldn't believe she had let her heart become entangled with this man's. She wanted to scream, "But I'm in love with you. I thought you were going to ask me to marry you." But that sort of thing just wasn't done, especially not in Lady Hackle's garden right outside of a sitting room filled with lords and ladies. She would be a laughingstock, and now she found herself having to go into the dinner party on the arm of a man who had just broken her heart. She hated the idea of having to explain all this to Lady Hackle, and she was angry with her friend for encouraging her to fall for this man so quickly. In that moment, all she wanted to do was run away. But instead, she stood there, passive as ever, just waiting to see what he would say. "Very well. I think we should go in to dinner then. I am so relieved we are of the same mind," he said. She decided then and there she needed to protect her heart, and she was happy she was wearing the brooch her husband had given her, because if she hadn't been, the blow from Sir Richard would have shattered her. As they walked back into the drawing room and took their places among the assembled guests, still waiting to go into dinner, she felt a cold, steely shiver move through her as she touched her brooch. The feeling stayed with her as they sat down at the dining room table, and she imagined it helped her not to cry and make a fool of herself in front of Sir Richard and the other guests. She could see that Lady Hackle was concerned for her, but of course they wouldn't be able to talk until after dinner, and even then it would be hard for the two of them to find some time to chat among themselves. And then, the strangest thing happened. Lady Hackle and Sir Richard seemed to exchange knowing looks, which made Lady Hackle smile, and she stood up, asking for the party's attention. "It is with great pleasure that I announce the engagement of my closest friend, Lady Tremaine, and Sir Richard of the Many Kingdoms. May they both be truly happy as they join their families, Lady Tremaine's daughters, Anastasia and Drizella, with Sir Richard's daughter, Cinderella. Everyone, raise your glasses to Lady Tremaine and Sir Richard." Lady Tremaine sat there in shock as everyone raised their glasses to celebrate their engagement, and she realized her heart didn't need protecting. After all, she and her daughters were going to live happily ever after, just as her friend Lady Hackle had wished.